MAGA continues to turn on Donald Trump over not the Iran war, not immigration, not the hollowing out of the federal government, but I think maybe on something that some of us didn't really see coming, which was Epstein, something that a lot of people not on the right kind of agree should be investigated. But Krystal, here's a little slice of someone burning their MAGA hats over
I'm not going to play with these anymore. MAGA hats are off. America First hats are on. Burn, baby, burn. And this is a great representation of what's left of MAGA.
Fighting words. Wow.
You do love to see it.
Yes. And over the weekend, there was, I guess, how many conferences does Turning Points USA have? Like every day there's like, oh, there's another Charlie Kirk conference.
It seemed like it went on for a really long time. That was a lot of content creation right there.
They had to. Here's Laura Ingraham asking people about the Epstein files, and listen to their answer.
How many of you are satisfied? You can clap. Satisfied with the results of the Epstein investigation? Clap. Okay, I told you to clap. You guys aren't listening. I'm not going to grade you on a curve. So I was going to get to that. How many of you are not satisfied with the results of the investigation?
Okay, Krystal, I just have to ask before we get to the new line. Mm-hmm. I felt like over the weekend, not whatever you think MAGA is, but a lot of the right-wing commentators had been flailing. Charlie Kirk was interviewing Megyn Kelly, and they were all like, I don't know, maybe Epstein is Mossad. You've got Laura Ingraham clearly thrown off by the fact that nobody clapped when she was like, who was satisfied? It's like, yeah, honey, because nobody's satisfied. But it seems like they were like, crap, what is the line? Look, Dan Bongino is still apparently deputy FBI director, still apparently MIA. Kash Patel is, I think, holding the line. Laura Loomer and other MAGAs are going after Pam Bondi, who is technically Kash and Bongino's boss. I mean, the buck stops with her, but MAGA's like, oh, what do we do?
Right. Well, and not only that, so their normal go-to is if Trump does something bad, it's not his fault. The people around him are sabotaging him. It's the deep state, blah, blah, blah. So the instant reaction was like, what's going on with Dan Bongino and Kash Patel? And then Trump immediately puts out a truth that's like, Kash and Dan Bongino are doing a good job. Love them. They're getting, quote unquote, back to the basics was what he said. And then there was a shift towards, oh, it must be that bitch Pam Bondi's fault then. It must be her. That's where we're going to put the blame. And then he comes out and, you know, Pam's doing a great job. There you go. What's going on with my boys?
And in some cases, is this how you address your kids, by the way, Krystal? I really hope that that's how you're talking to them now.
I need to start. That's
you should walk into every room in the morning. What's going on with my boys? And in some cases.
So here, not only does he have an epic open, but he backs up Pam Bondi entirely and then claims that the files were written by Obama, crooked Hillary, Comey, Brennan. And he did that other, responded to that other question where he was like, basically, how dare you continue talking about this dead creep when we've got so many other things? So at every pass, whatever cope they were trying to grapple with or grab onto, he just like cut him off at the pass. And so they had to get creative. You had Alex Jones floating like maybe what Trump's doing is he's using the files to blackmail the deep state so he can really get his agenda through and they can't do anything about it. And then I think after this, Alex Jones also just landed on somehow this must be the Democrats' fault and we're just going to stick with that. And then I know you're going to probably get to now they're just like, yeah, we trust Trump. We trust him. We're just going to stop talking about this now.
I think you actually called it when you said there's a pattern here. And it like, again, it's sort of like it's gone off track. They've gone off the tracks a little bit, and all the mouthpieces are like, what do we do? And now the ship is righting itself, similar to what happened when, Trump attacked Iran, and they were like, no new wars, but we're attacking Iran. And now you have Charlie Kirk saying he trusts his people in the government, and he's not going to talk about Jeff Epstein anymore.
Honestly, I'm done talking about Epstein for the time being. I'm going to trust my friends in the administration. I'm going to trust my friends in the government to do what needs to be done, solve it, balls in their hands. I've said plenty this last weekend. So if you guys want to see my commentary on it, that's fine. We have escalatory action potentially being taken in Ukraine and Russia. We have tons of announcements happening when it comes to NATO. But let me just say this again. Everyone knows my opinion about the Epstein thing, the messaging fumble. I would love to see the DOJ move to unseal the grand jury testimony. I think that would be a big win. I would love to see that. And I'm going to trust my friends, Kash, Patel, Dan Bongino, my friend Pam Bondi, all these guys. I'm going to Todd Blanche. I'm going to trust them to solve it. Ball's in their court. I think that there was plenty of, let's say, speeches that were directed towards this topic this last weekend. So we don't need to spend our valuable time on this program relitigating it.
Amazing.
Incredible. I don't know if you saw Dinesh D'Souza said something similar. I actually pulled it up so I could read it. He said, is it time to move on from the Jeffrey Epstein case? I want to argue the answer is yes. I'm going to talk about the Epstein files. I'm going to make the case that even though there are unanswered questions about Epstein, it is in fact time to move on. Ben Shapiro, he did a debate with Megyn Kelly. It's actually kind of interesting, this debate, but he said the same thing. He was like, Megyn, I was open to some of these potential conspiracies, but then they put out that memo. He actually said that. And she was like, you were convinced by the 2-page memo. He's like, well, not that so much as like, I really trust this administration. And you've got Trump and JD Vance and Kash and Pam and Dan Bongino. And so, look, I think there's no there. I think there's nothing to see here, and it's time to move on. I mean, it's also not lost on anybody that many of the people who are most strongly and firmly planted in the nothing to see here, time to move on camp are also very pro-Israel. And there is, something very noteworthy about that as well, and the potential Mossad connections. But no, like you said, they've gotten their marching orders. Fox News, Media Matters was tracking yesterday morning till noon, at least, 0 mentions of Epstein. The Trump administration, Trump himself placed a call to Charlie Kirk and said, stop criticizing Pam, and moved on from this. And that's basically what they're doing.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Megyn Kelly is just like, she's so mad she loves dumping on women. I love that Megyn Kelly's feminism is like, I support women everywhere, but Pam Bondi is a cunt and she needs to die. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Megyn Kelly is
but I mean, can't we get on board with that sentiment though? Really?
I mean, there's so many See Next Tuesdays in this administration, but I do think that this poll came out and it really, really pissed me off because of the way that we cover this. Because being being against genocide is really not a left or right issue. It's just kind of in the popular consciousness. Like it really does. It rises far above, party and politics. Epstein is similar. People who think that shady shit went down, that the connections that, Epstein had were too big to allow him to just be an alive person. Mm-hmm. That spans the gamut. And according to this new YouGov poll, is actually more prevalent when it comes to Harris voters. Yes, specifically Harris voters. It is more prevalent in liberals and leftists and Democrats. But do you think the government is covering up evidence it has about Epstein? Harris voters, 81% yes, 3% no, which means there's a lot of I don't know, maybe. Trump voters, 59% yes, the government's covering up evidence, and 12% no. Now, I understand that they're being asked that now. This is in July, so them saying yes would have to implicate their Lord and Savior, their God Emperor. But still, it is just wild to me. And it makes, to me, it's like Epstein was always an issue that spanned left and right, that most people talked about. And I was really annoyed and upset that once Jeff Epstein did die, the mainstream news dropped it like a hot potato. MSNBC never did any more exposés or discussions about the victims. Same, I forget who else, but like for many months there, Krystal, do you remember it was like wall to wall interviewing the Miami Herald reporters that broke the story. When he was arrested, it was like and then as soon as he died, it was like, nope.
Almost like that was the point.
Right.
Almost like that was the point. No, I really, on the one hand, it's sort of silly that this would be the thing that MAGA would be most upset about. And look, I think you and I both believe they're going to come back home. They're already coming back home. I don't know that there'll be any like substantial damage with regard to the base. But I think it's fair to say this is the issue where there's been the most tumult and the most upset. And so on one hand, you're like, okay, well, that seems silly when you compare it to like war, for example. I mean, Trump, on Ukraine, he's doing something totally different than what he advertised. Obviously, he bombed Iran, etc. On the other hand, I don't want to dismiss this as some just like side irrelevant conspiracy, because if Donald Trump is actually like a pedophile who Mossad has dirt on, that is pretty highly freaking relevant. And something that's really important that we should actually know about. And if there are others as well, like that would be important too. But he is the president of the United States. And if Mossad has very serious dirt on him, yes, I do actually think that's an important thing. Not to mention that I just went back and watched the Netflix documentary talking to these women. I mean, poor Virginia Giuffre, dead now. She like these women's lives were absolutely ruined and destroyed. And they were abandoned and betrayed by every level of the criminal justice system, all the way up to the end where Jeffrey Epstein is able to, escape and get away without having his day in court by very likely, I think, being killed, but quote unquote killing himself. So, to just sort of sweep that aside, this sexual molestation of underage girls Ponzi scheme, and pretend like that failure and accountability for that doesn't matter. It's also an attack just on sort of the like basic societal foundation trust in our systems and institutions and the ability to deliver justice and for everyone, not just those who, are poor, working class, middle class, et cetera. But yes, for the most powerful in the country. So I think that's an important issue. I think it's an important issue now. I think it was an important issue when no bankers went to prison. I think it was an important issue in terms of, trust when there was, continue to be a cover up around JFK, et cetera. Like these things actually do break down a society.
Yep. I know. I completely agree. And no, you're right. It's just, it adds to the lack of trust unraveling. But I love the back timing of Trump to be like, actually, it was Biden. Actually, it was Obama, even though we know that Pam Bondi and then his former Secretary of Labor were part of these sweetheart deals and or lack of, bringing any charges against Epstein. It was only when Pam Bondi was not AG of Florida that he was even arrested on sex trafficking charges.
That's right.
And I watched a documentary too, and I encourage everyone to I think it's the Netflix series about Epstein. It is devastating. It is insane, and we should like. The QAnon obsession of child trafficking, where they somehow think all of this leads to Nancy Pelosi, which is so ironic because Nancy Pelosi's daughter, when Epstein was arrested, tweeted something like, look, even if some of our faves are nabbed in this, which is maybe like Bill Gates, who does incredible, humanitarian work and whatnot, or, in addition to buying up way too much farmland and all this and all the other things about being a billionaire. But it's like, even she's like, look, we got to get to the bottom of this, even if people like Clinton are implicated, completely giving this like very honest, I don't care who gets ensnared in this because it's a huge deal. And I just want to move to the messaging real quick. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to elaborate on what you're saying about Alex Acosta, because he was U.S. attorney who, agreed to the sweetheart deal with Jeffrey Epstein. That was so bad that actually a judge came in and said, you actually can't do this. You violated the rights of these victims, because this was all negotiated behind closed doors, meant that none of the survivors here got to have their day in court, got to challenge this deal. And not only did it say, okay, you get a slap on the wrist and basically like home confinement, and then you get to go about, your life and continue doing the horrible things that you were already doing, but any co-conspirators also are off the hook. So Ghislaine Maxwell today is challenging her sentence up to the Supreme Court, saying, hey, I was part of that deal. Like, you made the deal, saying the co-conspirators get off. I was one of the co-conspirators. How come I'm in prison? And I don't know what direction that's going to go in. But even she is able to use, that's how unprecedented crazy this sweetheart deal was negotiated by Trump's first labor secretary from, or not first labor secretary, one of his labor secretaries from 2016.
Right. Now, I think some Democrats are actually messaging pretty hard on it, because I think what's been really frustrating is that they don't touch it. A lot of leading Dems don't want to touch the issue. And some are. I mean, this strong tweet from AOC, which immediately triggered the right. Wow, who would have thought that electing a rapist would have complicated the release of the Epstein files? Yes, a convicted sexual abuser, AKA rapist, however you want to parse that to, save yourself legally. But this follows from AOC being like, look, I'm not going to go to the inauguration of a rapist. Sorry, when she refused to go to Trump's inauguration. And of course, the right is like, we're going to sue you for defamation. Now, Krystal, I don't know how many, I think you've been on Piers Morgan too, but every time I think I made some sort of joke about Pete Hegseth being a rapist too. And immediately it's like, oh, we're going to sue you for defamation. It's incredible. And it always is like, I always forget to point out the hypocrisy. This is like, these are free speech warriors.
Right.
These are, you're a little special snowflake and, go to your safe space, people. But when you say anything, especially something that's actually grounded in like fact,
can't do that.
They're like, oh, defamation.
Well, and Trump has always been that way. And for AOC, I suspect that language was very intentional from her, because she knows that Trump sued George Stephanopoulos, wasn't it, over his use of the term rapist. Right. Because, well, technically he wasn't found guilty of rape. He was civilly liable for sexual assault. It was like, almost exactly the same thing. And there's no way that if you took that thing to trial, that they would have actually found in favor of Trump on this ludicrous defamation suit. But obviously the news network caved and wanted to essentially buy off Trump. And so that's what they did. So for her to use that language specifically, that he had already launched a lawsuit over, I think, it just shows it's the way you have to approach these people. Like, you can't be cowed. You can't cower. You can't be afraid. You have to go full steam ahead. That's the only thing that they respond to. And
they respect. I mean, John Ossoff said this. We have to move on, but I just want to play this because it was similar.
President Trump promised to end the wars. He promised to release the Epstein files. Did anyone really think the sexual predator president who used to party with Jeffrey Epstein was going to release the Epstein files?
So
how about that?
Yep. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room.